Hey guys, how you doing? I decided to start this video like this because smiling, as we all know, puts people at ease. So just keep smiling and you'll be alright. That's how you'll get through the world, yep. Okay, I'm gonna stop doing that now. Today's video is gonna be about One for All, or more specifically, the past generations of Luffy, get down there. The past generations of One for All, alright? In the most recent chapter of My Hero Academia, we got some more information about the past users, or rather, we got information about one of the past users, and information that there's a lack of information from a few other members. Hey, look, it's something to go on, alright? That's all that matters. And honestly, we did get something more important. In the last chapter, we figured out who the 5th user of One for All was, okay? And because of that, by extension, we now pretty much know the generations of all of the figures that we can actually see that are not in silhouette in this image here. When we were inside of Izuku's, like, inner world, so to speak, we now know the number generations of all of these guys, alright? Aside from the 2 that are in silhouette, those, I don't think it should surprise anybody, were the ones that we found out that we just don't know that much about them in terms of, like, the history, the records. All Might couldn't dig anything up on that. So yeah, let's talk about the last chapter, just like what's going over this. You know, All Might's talking to Bakugo and Izuku. He presents them with that notebook that says, okay, hey, here you go. This is all the information I could dig up on the past users and what their quirks were, because now we know that the quirks from the previous users, the ones that they had before they got One for All, are stored inside the quirk itself to be used at a later generation. Now, for some reason, All Might and Shimura Nana and all the other previous users, they were unable to access these quirks. They didn't even know that they could do that. So for example, All Might, you know, throughout his many decades of utilizing One for All, never activated Black Whip even by accident, okay? Up until this point, they just assumed that One for All was just a raw, you know, strength and speed and reactionary kind of boosting quirk, increasing all of your base stats, okay? Stronger, faster, more agile, that kind of stuff. But now with Izuku learning how to use Black Whip better and going into his inner realm and talking to the past users, and even the vestiges of their personalities still live on in One for All, this kind of changes the game here, okay? So the first thing we talk about, All Might brings up how back in the day when All for One first started gathering power, when he first started amassing all of his quirks, you know, killing people, taking people's quirks, moving them, transferring them to other people's, swapping them around. When he started amassing power like that in the first generation, okay, records were very, you know, sparse back then. And considering the fact that quirks just started manifesting, they weren't even called quirks at that point. They were called, like, just superpowers, okay? Because humanity didn't know what to do, because all of a sudden, holy crap, people are getting the ability to fly and lift up giant tractors out of nowhere. Some people are, not all of them, just some people are. And the people that did have superpowers back then were in the minority. You know, the people that would be considered normal were in the majority at that point in history, okay? Now, in the present storyline, when Izuku and Bakugo are going to UA, this is kind of organized in a much more bureaucratic way, where quirks are registered at, like, City Hall and stuff, so you could probably go to, like, your local library in the world of My Hero Academia and tell you, hey, how many people have had a quirk that allows them to breathe fire? And you could just probably do a search in, like, the quirk database and pull up. It's like, oh yeah, here's all the documented cases over the last few decades of people that had some ability to breathe fire or manipulate fire in some way, right? So it's much more easy to pull up that information now, but back then, records were not kept. So All Might says, listen, I tried as best as I could, and you know All Might's got connections, okay? And he's like, I could not find anything on the 2nd or 3rd users of One for All. I couldn't find a name, whether it be a real name or their hero names, if they even were heroes, I guess. That's something that's also up for debate, what they even did, if they did have quirks, you know, what their quirks were. Couldn't find anything else about that. However, we did find information about the 4th, 5th, 6th, and of course the 7th user is Shimura Nana, All Might's previous master, his mentor, so he would would know more about that from a personal way, just like, being, taught by her for so many years. And then, of course, you have All Might himself that would know a fair amount, and then you have Izuku, who's the 9th user, okay? So, from what we have right here with this image, we know from the last chapter that the guy that's all, like, decked out with, like, the battle gear and everything, kind of looks like Vin Diesel a little bit, he was the 5th user of One For All, and his name is Daigoro Banjo, alright? And he was the user of the quirk Black Whip before he received One For All. His hero name was Lariat! So that calls back to some Naruto Killer Bee vibes from that. Lariat! So that's a cool name, alright? Although when Bakugo was looking over his information in the last chapter, he was not very impressed. It takes a lot to get Bakugo impressed, granted, but he was looking at it just like, this guy, Lariat? I've never heard of this dude. This guy's a nobody. He has a quirk that allows him to create, those black whip-like things that, excrete them from his body, and he can angle them and move stuff around, and it's certainly a useful quirk. Like, no one can say that it's, like, a completely useless thing, but the way Bakugo was looking at it, like, this quirk is nothing really that special. It's nothing insane. And, of course, Izuku's really pumped because this is a new quirk that he's gonna have to learn to master, and there's a bunch of new quirks coming down the pipeline. We found out what Nana Shimura's quirk was in the last chapter. Her original quirk was Float, which just simply allows her to fly, and we see her next to Gran Torino. Gran Torino, of course, has the jet quirk that allows him to propel himself at high speeds. The Float quirk might not actually enable you to fly. It might just do what it says, allowing you to float, levitation, alright? However, utilizing One For All, like, okay, she can float, and then she can, like, kick the air using One For All. The enhanced strength basically, boom, does allow her to fly, might just give her better control over her, like, how she's angling herself because she is floating off the ground. There also might be a limit to how high she can float. So it's not freedom of flight completely, but since she does have One For All, or she did have One For All, that basically allowed her to fly freely, okay? And I'm sure she was training with the float quirk for a long time, alright? I'm sure at the very beginning she could only float a couple of inches off the ground, then she trains with it and she could float a lot higher, okay? Like several hundred feet, okay? Something like that. So, floating would be a very useful quirk, but once again, as Bakugo said, it's nothing really all that special, okay? Considering that you could have a quirk that has nothing to do with flight specifically, but you could still fly. Just as in the case with Bakugo, he can float and using his explosions, he can propel himself. Even what they thought One For All was before that, just a boost in strength and all of your physical stats, All Might could still fly by just jumping really far. Kind of reminiscent to Superman way back in the original Action comic days. In the earliest versions of Superman, I believe he wasn't able to fly at all. It was never actually stated in, like, the first issues he had the power of freedom of flight. He could just jump really far, okay? So kind of something like that where All Might can, kick off the ground, jump into the air, and then just kick the air using the wind pressure to propel himself different directions. We also saw Izuku do that in his most recent fight with Chisake, Overhaul, when he went into full cowling 100%. He was able, and plus with Ares' assistance, he was able to bounce around the air like that, okay? So, Bakugo's looking at it like, yeah, Black Whip, you can pull things and grapple onto things, that's whatever. Floating, alright, that's something, but it's nothing crazy, okay? And All Might goes on to basically agree with Bakugo. He's like, listen to me. One For All is not a quirk that was passed down with, like, oh, you have the ideal quirk to be passed down. Now, the next individual has this ideal quirk to be passed down. Like, this isn't a showcase of the strongest quirks of each generation, okay? And All Might expands on this. He says, back when All For One was enacting his reign of terror, things were a lot scarier. They were full of a lot more dread back then, alright? And honestly, how most bearers of One For All passed on their quirk to the next generation, they probably did not have the luxury of selecting and choosing and raising and mentoring a successor. It wasn't until this present storyline, when All Might has kind of amassed this world of peace now, that they actually have time to sit down and really think about who's going to inherit it next. All of the previous users of One For All died relatively young. I'm assuming probably in their 20s or mid to early 30s is when all of these users died. All Might is probably the one that's lived the longest with this power. He got the power before he was 18 years old. That's when Shimura Nana passed it on to him,
and then he lived through his young age, and then the Bronze Age, Silver Age, Golden Age. We don't know how old All Might is right now, and it's kind of a joke in the story of just like, how old are you? And then All Might's like, oh, well, I'm not gonna tell you. And they're like, oh, you old man, or you're acting like a teenage girl of how old you are, right? So I'm gonna assume that All Might is probably in either his late 40s or early to mid 50s. I would be comfortable with something like that. Like, maybe if you say All Might was 52, I could buy that. I could buy that. Because he's been a hero for multiple decades, okay? But because of his tireless efforts and his, he apparently did defeat All for One back in the day, like 6 years ago, and all of his efforts to quell the world, he did create a world of peace, and he did have the luxury of actually sitting down and looking through possible candidates to pass on his quirk to. It was going to be Mirio, at UA, who had the power of the permeation quirk. Like, man, this Mirio Togata, based on his quirk, based on his personality, his aspirations as a hero, this guy is the perfect person to pass the quirk on to. Now, of course, we know that didn't happen because All Might ended up meeting Izuku, but still, Izuku spoke to him because All Might was a quirkless middle schooler that was found and mentored by Shimura Nana, and I'm sure that All Might kind of saw the same thing in Izuku, like, quirkless middle school kid, he's striving to prove himself, looking up to me. Yeah, alright, I'll give you my quirk now, okay? But the other users, they probably didn't have that. So, we have first this guy, the guy that has the long hair with the tattoo, or maybe the markings on his face, kind of looks like he's a singer in a glam rock band from the 80s. He is most likely the fourth user of One for All. Okay, by the way, we know the first user, we don't know their name, but we know the first user, the one that originated this passing on quirk, this transferring quirk, and then he was giving the quirk to stockpile power by his brother. That's All for One's brother. Okay, so we know that. We don't know his name yet, but we know that was the first user. We know nothing about the second and third. This guy is probably the fourth user because we know for a fact Daigoro Banjo is the fifth user. And it was stated offhandedly that whenever All Might, I think it was brought up, like Izuku asked him once, like, All Might, like, who was the user before Nana? Or do you know anything about the previous users? And all Might knew about that was he's like, yeah, my mentor, Shimura Nana, mentioned she got her power. She got One for All from the sixth user, and it was a young man with black hair. Well, looking here, it's pretty obvious who it is. It's the kid that honestly kind of looks like he belongs in he's like the protagonist in a completely different shonen. Kind of resembles Shino from Naruto. Kind of resembles Vash. There was one guy, I posted this on Twitter today, I was going to be doing this video. Someone's like, he looks like Best Jeanus's emo son, or something like that. I'm like, well, you're not wrong, except it's more of maybe a leather jack. Best leatherist. Okay, that's getting into Midnight. That's like Midnight's prime team up there. Midnight's teaming up with Best Leatherist. Oh, this is gonna be an intense 18+ fight. Alright, so yeah, that kid though, the young kid, he's probably most likely the sixth user of One for All. Shimura Nana is the seventh, and then we get to All Might and Izuku. Also, something that you may notice is that the numbers of the generations that they are appear in their real names. So, Shimura Nana. Nana, in this instance, the way it's written in Japanese, the first na comes from nasu, which means vegetables, and the second na comes from nani, which I'm sure a lot of us, anime fans know what that means. It means what? Is it nani? Omae wa mo shinderu. Nani? I could do something really, really mean right about now. And, you know what? I think I am. Omae wa mo shinderu. Nani? You see, it's funny because All for One actually did end up killing, Nana Shimura, so that's, okay. So yeah, they don't actually use the kanji for 7 in her name, Shichi, but Nana is there, and Nana can mean 7. We have All Might's real name, Toshinori Yagi. The Ya in Yagi is 8. I think his, Yagi, so 8 tree, and then there's also the kanji for genius and law, also in his name. Even Izuku Midoriya, the Q in Izuku means an old story, like I'm gonna tell you an old story, but it can also be, as like Q means 9. Okay, so that's where that comes from too. And the fifth user we know of, Daigoro Banjo, the go, it's not the kanji for 5, but it's still read as go, which does mean 5, and the kanji is for enlightenment, and if you look in the corner of the kanji for enlightenment, you can see the kanji for 5, which means go. Okay, so there you go. So that's like a little naming quirk that Horikoshi is doing with the name. So I'm assuming when we find out, the Shino's real name, it's going to have the kanji for 6 in it. When we find out the glam rock star's name, it's going to have the kanji for 4 in it. But yeah, so that's the situation. The same thing with the second and third and probably the first users as well, just because that's a naming scheme Horikoshi's been going with, okay? So we get also a scene in the last chapter of this. We see these scenes all kind of taken, like there's like different areas that are cropped out, but we see the users in their final moments passing the quirk one for all on to the next users. We see the 4th, 5th, and 6th users passing them on, okay? So in the top one here, we see the 4th user, the glam rock guy, kneeling down and kind of passing it on to Banjo Daigoro. Then we see Daigoro all beaten and bleeding, yelling as he's handing it out, reaching it to the 6th user, the kid with the black hair. And then we see the kid with the black hair all beaten up, passing it on to Nana, who is off frame, okay? So that's how that works. And it's like, hey, in a lot of these situations, it's like they take what they can get, right? If they come across somebody to pass it on, like it might have just been somebody that they didn't even know about, right? Like let's imagine this. You're back in the era where All for One is like reigning supreme, okay? And things are way more intense back then, and there's like superheroes, or like the concept of a superhero might have not even coalesced into what it is right now yet. All right, so it's just pandemonium basically. You got people throwing superpowers at each other, okay? A lot of blood, a lot of battles, okay? You're the 4th user of One for All, the glam rock dude, and you get beaten down, and it's like, crap, I'm gonna die. I need to pass on this quirk because this isn't like Attack on Titan where if you have one of the Titan powers, one of the 9 Titans, and you die, the power goes into a baby. Like if you die and you're the current user of One for All and you haven't passed on that ability to someone else, I guess the quirk just stops dead in its tracks right there. Because one of the criteria for passing on the quirk is you have to willingly give someone your part of your DNA to consume it into their own body, and it's kind of hard to agree and consent to something when you're dead now, isn't it? Oh, yeah, it is. It's impossible, okay? So, I'm assuming that, yeah, when you die and if you don't pass it on, you're screwed. It just stops right there. So, you're in a battle with a bunch of other heroes and villains and All for One and everything, and you're about to die, and it's like, holy crap, I need to pass this on. And so, let's say the 4th user was a hero, and then Daigoro Banjo was also a hero working with him, and then maybe they didn't know each other very well, they weren't very close, but it's just like, hey, Banjo, man, I gotta give you this quirk. Just don't think about it. Just here, have a drop of my blood, have a hair. It needs to. You need to keep the fires of One for All burning. And he's like, okay. And then he eats it, and then he gets the power, and then he trains with it a little bit. Keep in mind at this point, you don't really have. I mean, other than the vestiges inside of you, you don't have any mentor to help you out. Like All Might got lucky. Izuku got lucky. A lot of these other users were probably just flying blind here. Okay. When Daigoro was about to die, maybe the kid, that kid with the black hair that was dressed like with Shino with the high collar, he might have not even have been a hero. He might, imagine this, imagine you're in a fight, Daigoro Banjo's fighting against All for One or like one of his minions or something, and he's fallen and he's bleeding out and he's about to die, and then this kid just walks by and he's like, kid, come over here. This isn't the best option, but I need to give you this power. And he's like, what? Why? I'm not even a hero. Do you want to be a hero? I'm like, well, I guess, okay. I guess, like, how do you think about heroes? I'm like, I like them. I'm like, all right, it's gonna have to be good enough here. And then just shoves them. I guess Daigoro didn't really have hair. Maybe he just took some blood or something. And just like, here you go. And so that's the reason why they don't all have these crazy powerful quirks. They're not the best of the best. They're just what was available at the time. It wasn't until Shimura Nana where she found Toshinori and began to train him, and she didn't even get to train him for that long, before All for One eventually attacked and they had to be separated and she had to give up, her life in order for Toshinori to get away, okay? But still, at least All Might learned a little bit more about the quirk than probably all the other users did, right? And of course, right now, we have All Might teaching Izuku the art of All for One, and
One for All, I mean, I'm sorry. I've long since given up doing reshoots on that. Like, whenever I mess up that quirk, it's just like, it happens way too often. I've probably called All for One, One for All so many times in this video. Just roll with it, right? Okay. So, alright. We got Black Whip, we got Float. We know the first user of the quirk, his quirk was the ability to transfer the quirk, so that's accounted for. All Might was quirkless, that's accounted for. Same thing with Izuku, unless you want to buy into the theory, like, oh, Izuku had a quirk that was stolen from him as a little kid. Okay, maybe, fine. I don't really go with that, because the whole thing, I look at that as like, hey, there's that, like, the extra bone in his foot that was maybe, now that could have been a lie by Dr. Ujiko. He could have just lied about that and said, oh yeah, you got an extra joint in your foot, in your toe there. That means you don't have a quirk, or you don't have the extra joint, or whatever. He could have lied about that, because it's Dr. Ujiko now. We know that ties back in some ways. So, hold off on that, and we'll see where that goes. But, that still leaves us the second and third generations, all right, that we know nothing about. Couple of things we would kind of assume about these individuals. First thing, because they're so early on in the development of One for All, they didn't probably have as much of the boost as All Might did in terms of strength and speed and stamina and all these physical stats, okay? The original user of One for All for One's brother, was a very weak individual. And the whole point of All for One giving him the stockpile quirk was because, like, alright, you can't be useful right now, but maybe if I give you this power that allows you to store power, then you could be useful to me someday. Of course, it melds with the transference quirk, so the second generation user of One for All that received that power probably got next to no kind of boost in terms of physical stats. Probably the same thing with the third, and probably even the fourth. It depends on how strong the users were, because I'm assuming, like, however strong the second user was physically, that physical stat boost gets put and added to the third user, and then when the third user passes it on, their stats get added to the second, and then get added to the fourth, and then that just keeps adding and adding and adding until you get to All Might, who has this ridiculous, like, super strength quirk that can pick up a giant building, okay? That's how that goes, right? And Izuku's, like, punching out giant robots and everything, okay? That's how probably that works with just the physical stat boost. So going along with that assumption, I'm figuring that the second and third users probably did have some pretty commendable quirks. Their quirks were probably very strong to the point where they would, they would be able to carry on One for All. I'm assuming that. I don't know that for certain, okay? Now, why do we not know who they are yet? That's the question. It's one thing for All Might to just say, hey, I looked through the records and I couldn't find any information about them. That makes sense. It was a long time ago. Hey, if you've seen the All Might Rising, the number 0 hero, the short OVA that was only like 3 minutes long, that shows, Nana separating from Toshinori and everything. If you saw that, and I think there was also a manga chapter to go along with it too, so this is canon. Gran Torino was telling All Might, your opponent, All for One, is a monster that's been alive for over 100 years. Okay? So that was over 100 years, and this was back when All Might was 18 years old. So this was like, All for One could easily be 130, 140, or older at this point, right? So, he's been around for a very, very long time, so it's understandable why these records from the first 2 and 3 generations would not be that, not be that reliable. But there's a really good reason why they're also not revealing them in, like, Horikoshi's not revealing them in Izuku's mind. When Izuku goes into his mental space, he can only see the fourth user onward. All Might is still like this, ember of fire inside of his mind. He's not coalesced into who he actually is yet. It might not happen until All Might actually dies. That's when the ember will take full effect. But even in, like, it's like, oh yeah, I was in this strange landscape and I saw all the previous users standing next to me, but the last 2 are in the background. I couldn't see them. They were shrouded in mist. And even in this panel, once again, they're there. You can see them in the background, but they're in shadow. So that at least gives me an idea that, like, all right, their appearance is going to be very, very significant. If it wasn't significant, if it was just like, oh yeah, here's random Joe Schmo that lived 120 years ago who had this random quirk that we've never seen before, we've never seen this person before, and he was the second, and this other guy that we also don't know was the third user. I'm like, there's really no reason to keep it a secret if they were nobodies that we never met before, okay? So this has led to a bunch of fan theories out there on who these two individuals are, specifically the second user, because if you look at the silhouette of, we're assuming is the second user, yeah, the silhouette looks really similar. It kind of looks, a lot of people are pointing to Bakugo, and I just saw a video today, actually, by a guy by the name of Turtle Quirk. I'll put that up here in a card. You go check out his channel. He made a video talking about how Bakugo is actually the second user of One For All, and I know what you're going to be, there's like probably a mountain of questions that just popped into your head when you thought that. You know, like, wait, how? But time travel. Time travel. Eri uses her rewind powers to activate time travel. That's basically the crux of that theory. Now, I don't know how I feel about Eri accessing time travel abilities, but, you know, it's not impossible that some sort of time travel quirk could evolve at some point. I'm just saying, I don't really know if I feel about that from Eri. But the idea is, like, this silhouette looks a lot like Bakugo, and another big thing of that theory in Turtle Quirk's video was, how did the first user of One For All know how to pass on One For All? That was something he brought up. Like, the Eri time travel thing, I don't really know if I feel about that. But that was something, a question he brought up in the video that I'm thinking, okay, that is a little weird. Because let's think about that. And he brought it up in the video, so go check that out. But he brings it up. He's like, in order to pass on One For All, you need to give someone your DNA. But you also have to be willing to give it over. And this isn't like in Bleach, where, you know, you can go into your inner world and talk to your Zanpakuto spirit and they can kind of explain to you how the powers work. This isn't like even in One Piece, where when you eat a devil fruit, like when Luffy ate the Gumu Gumu no Mi, he instantly knew it was a Gumu Gumu, and that's what it was called, the Gumu Gumu powers, and he can now turn his body into rubber. This isn't like that. Like, you're born with a quirk, if you are born with a quirk. There's some people that are still quirkless. You're born with a quirk, and you kind of have to just develop the quirk on your own. Now, there's, with the generations, like, because I think we're in, like, the 5th generation right now, either the 4th or 5th generation Izuku's in right now, because they've had so many decades to study quirks. Like, they have, like, scholars that, like, devote their lives to go to university and learn about quirk studies and quirk, like, genetics and biology and stuff. Because we're in the future now, we can look at the graph and been like, oh, okay, your dad had a fire quirk and your mom had this quirk, so you'll probably have this quirk or some combination of the two. That makes sense now, even though there still are aberrations, Eri being a prime example of that, and then, you know, if Izuku truly was quirkless from the beginning, that's also an exception there. But back in these days, the first generation of quirks, which I'm assuming, you know, All For One was the first generation, as well as his brother. They were probably both part of that first generation of quirk users. There are no people studying this at this point and actually being able to explain, like, how to develop your powers. Like, now we have probably, like, an elementary school in the My Hero Academia world probably has, like things and tests you can do to see what kind of quirk you have and how you can do it and what it does and all that stuff. Back then, you didn't have that. So that is kind of confusing. It just, like, because even One For All's brother did not know he had the quirk to transfer other quirks. He didn't know he had that. And all For One did was give him the stockpile quirk. So he didn't know it either. So the only way around this, maybe, is if at one point All For One got his hands on a quirk that allows him to learn about how other quirks work, which is not an impossibility. Maybe there's a quirk that allows him to see the secrets of something or learn more about somebody by touching them. If he got his hands on that quirk, maybe he could then, like, you know, touch his brother's head and be like, ah, so you did have a quirk this whole time, and it's a quirk that allows you to transfer powers, so you'll be able to transfer that stockpiling quirk to somebody else, and then he learned about it, and it maybe something like that is the best thing I can come up with. And then the theory goes on, like, well, where does Bakugo come through? Well, you know, go see the video, but the idea here is that Bakugo, because he knows so much about One for All right now, because All Might trusts him and they're in the meetings with Izuku, Bakugo goes back in time, tells the original user how to pass it on. So that's where that information comes from. Bakugo becomes the second user and then passes it on further and further, creating this time loop. Now, just a few things I want to bring up. Yes, this silhouette does resemble Bakugo, but Bakugo's not the only character in My Hero Academia that has that kind of spiky hair. I mean, I looked at Dabi. Dabi also has the hair that looks very, very similar. Kirishima, Sato. There's a bunch of characters in My Hero Academia that have that spiky kind of hairstyle with a few minor differences. And there's honestly, it just seems like the thing that's how Horikoshi, whenever Horikoshi wants to draw a character with spiky hair, he does it kind of like this. Dabi and Bakugo's hair look remarkably similar with each other. So I'm not saying that's oh, okay, well, that's obviously Bakugo because there's no one else it could be. Yeah, there's definitely other characters it could be. Even if Horikoshi wants to introduce a brand new character in the second and third users, but he's just saving them for later because they are going to be very relevant. He just doesn't want to reveal them yet, or he hasn't exactly fleshed out everything they're going to do yet, so he wants to keep it a secret. Well, I kind of have a general idea on who the second and third users are going to be, but I might want to workshop their designs a little bit. The third user seems to have a mohawk or really hair that springs back like an onion sort of thing, so that's something interesting there. But maybe Horikoshi wants to tinker with their designs a bit. So I'm not going to immediately jump to that conclusion, but it was an interesting theory that I thought I should bring up, okay? And, it would explain why they were kept in silhouette and everything. Oh, that's going to be the big reveal, It was Bakugo this whole time, because Bakugo, I mean, he does know a lot about One for All at this point, and he would know how it's passed on, and he would know how to train with it and everything if he had it. So, and then of course that would mean eventually Izuku would get his hands on the explosion quirk, which would be rather poetic by the end of the story or something, right? But yeah, that's a theory, and that's all that is right now. But I guess we'll see. As for the third user, nothing really on that individual, and it's just as a mystery. We have no idea what's that. But yeah. So we're going to be, I guess, focusing on Shimura Nana's float quirk next. I don't know why exactly they know for certain that's going to be the next one down the line, because I guess that's the only one that they know about other than the Black Whip. So until either somebody else appears in Izuku's mind and the kid with the black hair or the glam rock dude explains to them what their quirks were, until then I guess we're just going to focus on Shimura Nana's. And I'm actually okay with that, because that means we're probably going to get a few more flashbacks with Nana, and also that means Nana might very well appear to Izuku in his inner world and teach him about her quirk a little bit. And Nana is an amazing character, and also she damn fine. She's pretty damn fine too. So it's all right, cool. We get more Nana maybe in the upcoming arcs. That'll be nice. And then we're probably not going to find out about the second and third users until much later. We still got to get through Nana's and then the sixth and fourth users. So there's probably still a lot more time here. And plus, we're going to have an entire story arc, focused in between that. I don't think we're going to have all right, this is going to be an entire story arc where Izuku learns how to master the float quirk and nothing else. No, it's probably going to be, here's a new story arc with a new group of villains, a new group of antagonists for the students to fight against, and they're going to have their lessons at UA. All the while this is going on, in the background, Izuku's trying to master float. And then he's trying to master the sixth and the fourth users, and then this is in the background. So we're not going to get into the second and third users for probably quite some time. We're going to focus on these first three, 4, 6, and 7 before we get to 2 and 3. All right. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and then we'll see where this goes from here. But we're slowly piecing together the mystery of One for All, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the story. Have a great day, everybody, and remember, you gotta smile, ladies and gentlemen. You just gotta smile. You'll either become a hero or turn into the Joker, one or the other. Smile, Barry.